welcome to Psych Sessions, conversations about teaching and stuff. I'm Eric Landrum, along with Garth Neufeld, your podcast hosts. As the name implies, we center on conversations about teaching, but we often veer into other interesting topics, which is the end stuff. This is episode number 57, where Garth had the opportunity to interview Ted Bosack, Professor Emeritus from Providence College in Providence, Rhode Island. Now, before you hear the interview, please allow me to share some listening tips and some of my favorite moments. And please do subscribe to us, that is Psych Sessions, on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, because that helps us pop in the search results. And while you're there, you might as well rate us too. Now, this was delightful. So Garth had a chance to interview Ted at NECTOP, the New England Conference for Teachers of Psychology, back in late 2018. And so they naturally did some of the backdrop of NECTOP and how it becomes associated with NEPA. And what was really cool about this is that I believe they sat down for this interview right before, at NECTOP, the inaugural Ted Bosack lecture series address that was going to be given by Barney Bynes. And so that was very cool. And then they kind of did the reverse chronology, as we often do on the podcast. And so Ted really talked about how he got involved with STP and how he took a deeper dive into the teaching and becoming a scholarly teacher. And he attributed that chiefly to his participation in P3, which is actually the Psychology Partnership Project, which happened in 1999 at James Madison University. And he mentions Ginny Matthey. And I'll let him tell that story, but it's really pretty interesting. And then he does do the typical origin story that we talked about. And it was really interesting. I almost wish they'd gone into more detail about the two brothers, and Ted is the younger brother. And he actually talked about he didn't want to be that little Bosack again and go to Yale like his older brother. So he goes to Brown University, which is not too shabby, as I understand, universities on the East Coast. The interest in hockey that they have together. And then I loved hearing Ted talk about his graduate program, how he studies with Lewis Lipsitt, who was a well-known name in experimental child psychology. And so that was just delightful. You know, if anybody who knows Ted, kindest, most gentle, competent, just a heart and soul of a gentleman, but also accomplished. However, it would just kill him to actually acknowledge it, because he wants to do this self-deprecating thing. And something, I think a lot of us in higher ed do. And Garth, bless his heart, did not actually give him a hard time about it. And so I think that was very nice on Garth's behalf. Ted had just recently, when they sat down for this interview, had just returned from his 60th high school reunion. So that was kind of fun to hear Ted talk about that. And I'll let him describe what that was like in his own words. He talked about, of course, getting to know Jane Hallinan through a program review, and then the importance of the AP reading in his development as a scholar and a teacher. And then, of course, his, I think it was a 10-year stint. I don't know if I did the math on the number of years as executive director of STP, the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. And so Tom Pusateri is the initial executive director. Ted Bosack takes over for him after Tom steps down. And then after Ted's stint, Tom actually takes back over. And so he is the middle of that Oreo sandwich in that very important position for STP. It was just a lovely chance for the two of these guys to sit down. They're about a generation and a half apart, but, both of them very dedicated teachers of psychology. And, for me, knowing them both fairly well, it was just a real delight to listen to them talk shop. And I hope that you enjoyed this interview as much as I enjoyed listening to it as well.
I am here at NECTOP, which is the Northeast Conference for the Teaching of Psychology. Did I get that right?
You did.
Okay. And I am with Ted Bosack. Ted, is your full name Theodore, but you go by Ted?
That's correct.
Okay. Does anybody call you Theodore?
No.
Okay.
only when I go to doctor's offices.
Right. Yeah, when you have to put your full name down.
Right.
Wow, and you're from this area, are you?
Actually, I was born in Pennsylvania,
Okay.
and my family moved to Connecticut when I was very young.
Oh,
And so I grew up in Connecticut.
but
And
you live close to here now?
right now, I'm living in Wakefield, Rhode Island.
Okay. Which is how far?
About an hour and a half
Okay. Yeah.
from Worcester.
Yeah. I don't know. I meet so many people at these conferences. For some reason, I thought you were, I don't know, I thought you were in the South somewhere for a period of time until I put together that you kind of started this neck top thing with Barney, didn't you?
No, Barney started it.
Oh, did he?
And I'm not certain of just what the year was, somewhere probably around 1994 or somewhere in that area. And he started it in Ithaca, where he was in his teaching. And he ran it there. It was called the Ithaca Conference informally, and he ran it there for years and years. And then he took a position in Washington at APA for a couple of years and was looking for some place to let the conference land, and proposed it be picked up by New England Psychological, which they agreed to, and I started to chair it at that point. It was about 2000, I think. And then I ran it for about 16 years after that, 17.
So NEPA is New England Psych Association, but neck top is Northeast.
Isn't that? Well, yes, that's what it is. And it might seem strange, but given that they had totally separate inceptions.
Right. Yeah, you know, in my role, we were talking about this last night, in my role as Director of Regional Conference Programming for STP, it's such a learning curve to get my head around the origins of all of these different conferences and how they treat teaching programming. But NECTOP has always been teaching focused, and it's a pre-conference now to NEPA. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
And it focuses entirely on teaching.
Now, is there a teaching track through NEPA as well, or not?
I wouldn't call it a track because it's only a one-day conference, and so when I was involved with the board, we always tried to get grant support for a teaching speaker, and there's focus on trying to get information for undergraduates about graduate school and things of that kind. But given the shortness of the conference, it'll have something, one or two things on teaching during the day, but not really a track per se.
Right. So this relationship between NEPA and NECTOP has been going on for about 18 years.
Yeah.
And it's always been NECTOP's a one day and NEPA's a one day?
Yeah, and they merged on Friday. The NECTOP is on Friday and finishes up the 5:30 talk, 6 o'clock talk, whatever it is, on Friday night is actually part of NEPA.
Okay.
But the people who are at NECTOP are invited to attend. There's one fee for the both of them.
Okay. And that fee's pretty low, if I remember correctly.
I don't remember what it is.
Yeah, it's relatively, I mean, it's really reasonable. That was one thing that stuck out to me. Now, that evening talk that kind of brings both sides together, and we'll have that tonight because it is Friday night. I'm going to put you on the spot right now. I'm going to read this because this is fun. They had this on the registration table, and Ted's a pretty humble guy from my estimation, so I won't make you say it. So I'm reading from the program for NEPA and NECTOP, and it says, "We hope you will join us for the cocktail reception at 5 o'clock today." So that's a good start to the night right there. And inaugural Ted Bosack lecture series keynote address this evening from 5:45 to 6:45. And I understand that this is the first year that that's happened. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And Barney's giving the address, the first one.
That's correct.
Tonight. So talk to us about how did that come to be? How did you find out that they were naming a lecture after you?
Well, that was funded by STP. Mm-hmm. And when I retired from my position as executive director at STP, the executive committee just rained upon me any number of complimentary comments, and most of which are unjustified, and they decided to make a grant to NEPA Necktop to start a lecture series in my name, and I'm just totally humbled by that. I think about it a lot when I'm in that mode, and it's just it's really kind of overwhelming to think that somebody thinks that you had that kind of impact in your profession.
Yeah.
Striking.
Yeah. When you set out to do this work, in the year 2000, could you imagine that it would lead to something like this?
Not a chance.
Yeah.
No. And in the year 2000, when I started that, well, a lot of things were happening to me around that time. And, the P3, the Psychology Partnership Project, took place at James Madison in 1999. And I was very fortunate to be able to go to that. I was president of New England Psychological at the time, and Ginny Matthey, who ran most of P3, contacted the regional people and asked for support in the terms of just saying, we support you. They weren't asking for any money. They just wanted to say that you were on board with P3. So I wrote back to her and said, yeah, we're on board, and I'd like to go. And she said, send us a resume. And so I did. And I was very surprised that they decided I would go. I had no contact with the group before that, and so I went to that. And that was just a massive change in my career. I met people there that just made so much of a difference in the next 20 years, 30 years.
Is that where you met a lot of your good friends?
Absolutely.
Is that where you got to know Barney?
Yeah, that's where I first met him. And I was on the assessment committee at P3, which was chaired by Rob McIntarfer, who was just a fabulous person. And on the committee were Jane Hallinan, Dana Dunn, Bill Hill, Maureen McCarthy, a couple of high school teachers, actually community college teacher, I'm blocking on her name right now, and Kristen Whitlock was in the group. I mean, could you pick?
That was just your group?
That was our group.
Oh, my goodness.
And it was overwhelming to see the talent.
Are the other groups, because I know all those names today,
Yeah.
they're leaders in teaching of psychology. Were the other groups as well represented? Or did something happen in that group?
I think that other groups had good representation. Anybody there was a pretty talented person, except, I snuck in the back door. But, it was a pretty remarkable group overall. But for some reason, our group caught fire. And the ACT program, the Annual Conference on Teaching, actually grew out of stuff that committee did. We started the best practices conferences about 2 or 3 years after P3. Bill Hill really spearheaded the events in Kennesaw, and we had meetings in best practice meetings in Atlanta for a number of years. And that evolved into what is now ACT.
That's crazy. I didn't know the backstory of best practices and where it started. So it starts from that room with those people in it.
Yep. Bill had the idea, we were setting goals. What are our goals going to be? And one of the goals was to put together a best practices conference on assessment. And then once that went and was remarkably successful, decided that what we should do is to try to hit other topics and look at best practices in other areas. And they did intro psych and research method statistics and went back to
So every year
assessment.
they would pick a new topic for best practices,
Yeah.
and then folks would show up. Do you remember how many people were there the first year?
My guess, I'm guessing about 120, but I'm probably wrong.
Well, that's significant. How do you get 100? I run a conference up in Pacific Northwest, and it's hard to recruit people to come to conferences. How did you guys get 120 people out?
I wasn't in on that part of it.
Okay, yeah.
It had to be, Bill working out the outreach, and certainly we had the backing of APA because the P3 program was an APA sponsored event, and they were happy to provide what advertisement we needed for the conference.
Right. Yeah, and I think I'm surprised because I think for conferences you kind of start small and then it snowballs as people attend it and invite other people and have a good experience or whatever. But to go from nothing to, say it's even 100, say it's even 80, that's a lot of people. I mean, we were just in Necktop is about probably just a little under that for size, and you guys did that in your first year.
Well, when you think of the people who were behind this, and as you say, these are leaders in teaching of psychology, right. And so when the program was put together, many of the presenters were this group who were extraordinarily talented people, and I think were recognized at that time. And assessment was a really hot topic, just beginning to be the really hot topic that it has become at that point in time. So all of that probably contributed to some degree.
So have you been to every best practice ACT since?
No, not everyone. I've been to a lot,
yeah,
but not everyone.
What do you think?
And of course, whereas the assessment group started this thing, when it got past the first year of assessment, it became more of a general STP activity.
Right. So when did it get broadened out that it wasn't going to be specific, like topic specific? When it became ACT, or was it before that?
It was when it became ACT.
Okay.
And that was probably, 5 years ago?
Yeah,
maybe?
not that long ago.
Yeah.
In all your conference going and organizing experiences, I guess I have two questions. One's going to be about skill set, so I want to come back to that in a second. But why do you think people come to these conferences? What is it about teaching conferences, psych teaching conferences in our community in particular, that draws people?
Of course, I don't know.
Of course, yeah.
But guessing, I'd be inclined to say that if you look at who the people are who are here, at least at Necktop, they are by and large not people from R1 institutions. They're people from organizations, from colleges and community colleges, high schools often, where the emphasis is more on teaching. They have more and more responsibility to do publication and research, but most of these institutions, I think if you talk to the people who are here, they'll say that they really are focused on teaching. And I think that this kind of program that Necktop has, that ACT has, are the kinds of things that really give you solid tools to work with. And there's always things that you can walk out the door, teach your class on Monday, and you can use some of the stuff that's there. And I think that's what will bring people in.
Right, yeah.
Sometimes it's names. Sometimes if you happen to have a person who's very well known,
yep.
That'll bring in some people, at least for part of the time. But I think mostly it's people are striving to improve their teaching and feel comfortable in the classroom and feel comfortable with their students. And this is a help.
So I was going to ask about skill set. Do you have when you took over this conference, did you have the skills at that point to run and program a conference, or did you acquire it? You said that you were formerly president of, what were you president of?
New England Psychological.
Oh, you were. Prior to taking on the Necktop role, correct?
Yes.
So there was some, and obviously you were the executive director for STP as well.
Not then.
No, but later for many years. So you have some administration skill, apparently.
Apparently.
Yeah. So what does it take, or what did you, early on, what did it take to pull off a conference? Was it, did you feel comfortable with it? Was it a steep learning curve?
Well, I was scared because I'd never really done anything like that on my own. In working with New England Psychological, things were pretty much in place, and you just sort of rolled out what was going to happen. And in this situation, we were moving from Ithaca to actually the year before I took it over, Noreen Jalbert, who was at Western Connecticut, ran Necktop for the year. And then it was picked up by NEPA, and that's when I started to get involved. And it was a separate group. Basically, I think there were a couple of us who put together the program, primarily me, and I was lucky to have met the people I met at P3 and afterwards. So I think that, to me, my focus, I don't know, I developed a skill set, I guess, but my initial focus was to get as many really wowing names as I could find who would come cheap, and because we had no budget to speak of, and get invite people whom I could be in touch with around the area to give the concurrent session. So you get who you could for big names for the keynotes, and then as many people who also had some recognition for the other sessions. And that helped. We ran as high as 100 people, 110 maybe, at our peak.
Yeah. Is it hard to get local people to present concurrent sessions?
I rarely had anyone turn me down.
But you would reach out and ask people?
Initially, all of it was invited. And I don't think I had one time that I invited anybody for a keynote or for a concurrent session that they turned it down. We paid travel for the keynotes. We picked up the cost of registration for the concurrent sessions, but anything else people had to cover themselves. And as I say, nobody turned it down. And then when it began to get hard to find people that I knew were active, we did go to inviting submissions, and we got some really good stuff that way too.
So now people can submit too.
I believe that's probably the way they're still doing it.
Right. And remind me how long it's been since you've been a part of that board.
2 years.
Oh, okay.
3 years.
Okay. So just that was right around the time then you were finishing up with your role with STP as well.
Yeah.
Around that same time.
That's right.
And are you retired now?
I am.
Okay. I want to get into your backstory and where you taught for all those years in a minute. But I'm fascinated by the programming aspect and your experience, and so I'm just mining you for wisdom right now.
I should say that when I started to do it, NEPA and Necktop had, I think, no dedicated executive officer. So everything was done by the steering committee, and steering committee had to, the president and the president-elect and the past president had responsibility for putting together the NEPA program, physically typing it out, sending out the invitations to attend. All that stuff was within the committee itself, and primarily the triumvirate of the presidents. We hired, when I was president, Gary Brosvik from Ryder to take over the role as executive officer or something. I forget what the title was at the time. And Gary is just one of the most dynamic people you'd ever want to see, focused and dedicated to the job he's doing. And so he began to put things together, and that made the burden much lighter for the committee and for me as the chair of Necktop. And then there was a hiatus in time. Gary was with us for a while, left after a while, and then he came back and took over again to run NEPA. And he developed a database of people for outreach that was massive. And we just got more and more people coming. We had attendance close to 700 at some of the NEPA meetings. And it was all, I think, that outreach and that dedication to making sure that people knew about it.
Did you feel like Did he like that kind of work of like gathering folks together? Is that
I think he does.
Is that what fired him up?
But that's not all. I mean, he is a researcher. He has 4 or 5 posters this year at NEPA. I'm looking forward to seeing him tomorrow.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, that's great. Lots of times when we talk to folks, we get into their backstories just to figure out where they're from and try to look for some themes of maybe early life experiences that led you to think about maybe teaching or other careers. And so I want to get into some of that with you, if that's all right. And maybe we'll start with this, and we'll work our way up to your roles with STP and what that's meant to you. Maybe end there if we can. But so you grew up in Pennsylvania. Is that right?
No, I was born in Pennsylvania. In Hartford, Connecticut area.
In Connecticut. So how far are we from Pennsylvania here?
Well, when I was a kid, from Hartford to Pennsylvania was a 6-hour ride.
Okay.
Probably today it's a 4-hour ride with better highways and better cars.
Right. Yeah, everything is so condensed here on the East Coast. So I always know I'm fairly close to some different location that would seem like maybe it was further away, if that makes any sense. So yeah, you grew up in Hartford, Connecticut, and were you a Whalers fan then?
The Whalers came later.
Oh, okay.
I'm older than you might think, and but yeah, we went to see the Whalers.
Was there any hockey in Hartford before the Whalers?
Not that I know of. I got interested in hockey in college, actually, when my first wife was really dramatically interested in hockey and wanted to be a hockey player and used to fight with boys in high school to get a chance to play in her figure skates. And she got my 2 sons into playing hockey, and, from there on, my word.
Yeah. They didn't go professional, though, did they?
No, Sean played in college.
Okay, cool.
And he continues to be involved. He's in Milwaukee now, and he coaches at various youth levels and has done a great deal of work with kids, trying to help them with prep for college and introducing them to coaches in the area, things of that sort.
Well, that's interesting. It sounds like there is something a shared responsibility or desire to help college students or prepare college students in father and son. So when you, what was school like for you in Hartford?
I went to Hartford Public High School, just actually went to my 60th high school reunion last month. And it was a big school. It was one of 3 in the big city. And
yeah. What's it like to go back after 60 years and see people from?
It was fun.
Yeah.
I was as apprehensive as I am about any social situation. I'm kind of a social phobe, and so I didn't know what quite to expect. And I don't know if it was Freudian or what, but I had tried to go to my 25th reunion, and I woke up the morning of it and had realized that I got a call. I put it on my calendar for the next week, and I missed it. And so I go to this one, and I get there at noon, which is what I thought the beginning time was, and I'm met at the door by the chair, who tells me this started at 11. Where were you? I thought you were skipping us again. But in any event, I walked in and ran into some old friends very quickly, and it was a very, very pleasant time. I've heard people talk about being unhappy with their reunion experience because people were so competitive and bragging about this and that. And I don't know if at this point, after 60 years, we just didn't have anything that we wanted to brag about or what, but people were very cordial, and it was a very nice time.
60 years from not high school.
Yeah.
Well, you look good, man.
Thank
wow.
you.
Yeah, that's wild. My wife just went to her, what would it have been? I don't know how many years it would have been. 20? 20 year. She just went to her 20 year, and she said all the women basically looked the same, and none of the men did. So I don't know what that meant, but because it's weird when men start losing their hair, it changes the way that they look, and I'm not sure. I don't know.
I it struck me that there were some people I recognized, male and female, very quickly, and some that I didn't at all.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you ever get in conversations with people and it just clicks at some point, some long lost memories, or did anything like that happen?
Well, of course, yeah, that did.
Yeah.
And well, actually, what struck me as most remarkable about the thing is I was looking through a folder they had of programs from events that had happened when we were in high school, and I came across this program for club night. And I started to think, what is club night? It's vague recollection there's a club night. And I look at it, and I read the thing, and it turns out that Ted Bosack was the chair of club night that year. And I don't remember a thing about it. It totally lost.
Just slight familiarity with the words.
And then I was talking to a guy who was ahead of me in school, who was a friend of my brother's. And he reminded me about the things that went on at club night, and indeed, then I remembered it.
There you go. Get some cues. Did you have a good school experience, would you say?
You know, I was thinking a little bit about the kinds of things I might say to you in this situation, and I think that my circumstances have been, in some ways, very fortuitous and serendipitous. In other ways, I think, and this strikes me about the talk that we just heard, people I had, mentors that I encountered at various points were just remarkably critical. And I recall that in high school, I had a physics teacher, Mr. Brooks, who took an interest in a number of the kids. I had a job working in the book room, which was the place that distributed the textbooks at the beginning of the year and collected them. His wife ran it. And, we spent time with them. They would have us to their house, me and the other guy who worked in the book room. And they would talk about their experiences. This guy was from, I don't know where in the South, but he had deep Southern drawl. And, he set up a model that I thought was really, really quite fabulous. And so that was an inspiration. And I ended up going to Brown, where the other fellow who worked in the book room also went, and very happy I did that too.
So what was it about? Was it that this teacher would have you into his home, make an effort to have a relationship with one of his students and do some informal mentoring? Is that what you would say it would be?
I think so. I had him. Actually, I don't think I ever had him as a physics teacher per se. I had the other physics teacher, and this guy just was very concerned and caring, and he was a real Southern gentleman. And, he would teach you manners when you went to dinner and that kind of thing.
Did you ever get to tell him that years later?
He died before I graduated. And as a matter of fact, very stunning kind of thing is that this fellow and I found his body in the school.
Oh, my goodness.
Where apparently he had some kind of a seizure. And we were there late after school because we were working in the book room and there was nobody else around. And so, no, I did not get the opportunity to tell him that, although we did tell his wife.
Wow. What an impact that he had on you.
Yeah,
so,
that's big.
How often do you think about, over the years, do you return? Well, I guess maybe the question that I'm asking is, have you thought about that over the years, and has it impacted the way that you taught?
I don't know that it's impacted the way that I've taught. I have thought about it from time to time, and I think it did impact the decisions I made, initially at least, in moving forward to college and graduate school. But no, as I said, as far as teaching itself is concerned, teaching techniques, there was really, when I got into teaching, there was nothing like the stress we have today and the opportunity we have today for picking up good, solid foundations in teaching. And the kinds of things that happened when I was in college was the professor got up and gave you a lecture. If you had a lab course, you got your hands on in that respect. But there was really, I can't remember a teacher that I had in college who really did much beyond the lecture approach. And that's what I fell into.
Right. So you went to college. First of all, did you feel like you were pretty prepared by your high school and your primary and secondary education for college?
Yeah, I think generally, with this fellow having been such an inspiration, I was going to major in physics, and I quickly learned that my skills in physics were not the level that his were, and that differential equations were far more difficult than I ever imagined they might be. So I got out of that. But aside from, I felt, that college, I was okay.
Yeah.
I was doing all right.
So you went to Brown?
I did.
Where's Brown?
Providence, Rhode Island.
Oh, it's in Rhode Island, so nearby.
Yep.
Everything's nearby around
Yeah,
here.
I didn't have that much of a wide exploration.
Yeah. Did you apply to any other colleges or?
I did.
Uh-huh.
Where else did I apply? I applied to Yale. My brother went to Yale, and my parents really wanted me to go to Yale, and I just did not want to be little Bosack again. So
You're the younger of
I am.
one brother?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I wasn't going to go there. And I guess I applied to Trinity College, which was right up the hill from where I lived in Hartford. And I did want to get at least a little bit away from home.
So you weren't trying to get a long way from home?
No, I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah. So do you go right in as a psych major into Brown?
No, I went in as a physics major.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah. And after I dropped out of the physics major, I took intro psych. That's probably late in my sophomore year. And boy, did that click for me. Man, I just ate it up.
What was it?
It was the application of science to behavior. And although I was not terribly good about the mathematics of physics, I did have a really good sense of research method, and that was so important. And then what I could see at Brown, the faculty was a very experimentally oriented faculty. There were no clinicians, I think, on the faculty at all when I was there. And Harold Schlossberg, one of the pillars in early psychology of learning and perception, was the department chair. And, the opportunity to, he taught the course. And again, it was not the most wonderful teaching experience, but the content, oh man, I just had to touch this scientific method in behavior, and it just seemed to come to me.
Interesting. Yeah. I think sometimes on this podcast we talk about how sometimes we find psychology and sometimes psychology seems to find us.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what happened for you. So do you make the jump right away? You're going to be a psych major after that course?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And
it proved my whole experience in college, too. I just got better at everything.
Interesting. You, were your parents college educated?
No.
They weren't?
No. My parents were born in the U.S., but they were first generation born in the U.S. They were, my father worked as a bread salesman. He delivered bread. Moved up in his company to become the general manager of the local branch of the particular national bread company. And my mother worked too, but she was mostly a housewife.
But they have two boys, one of whom goes to Yale and one who goes, and where did he end up doing for career?
He got a master's degree from Yale he got a master's degree from Harvard in teaching, and he taught high school till he retired.
Well, that's kind of interesting that you both landed in teaching.
Yeah, hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. Huh. And you go to Brown, and then after you get your undergraduate degree, you go on to where?
Well, I went to UConn for just a short time. one thing I want to say about this notion of mentors and what guides you in what direction. When I took a course with Lou Lipsitt at Brown, his experimental psychology course, and Lou is internationally known child psychologist. And I loved the course. That again, boy, did that click with me. And I was applying to graduate schools, and I had applied to a school not too far from here. And Lou knew that I and another student, Lou Lipsitt knew that I and another student had applied to this place. And he said, well, I think I might want to go up there and take a look at it, talk to some people. Can I give you a ride up for an interview visit? And I thought, holy cow, this was another one of those circumstances where this guy was taking an interest in somebody that just happened to be a student of his who may have been good, may have been bad, but he was doing it. And we went, both of us. Then on the way back, I remember that he went through. He said, when you think about where you're going to go to school, you want to consider certain things. What does that program have? And then he proceeded to describe these things, and clearly, it was not this program we had just visited. And that always struck me. I remember thinking at the time that he was saying this, I'm not going to go here. And that was really kind of insight that I very much appreciated coming from someone. And so, that was a major influence on me, but in a couple of ways. And then I ended up deciding to go to UConn. Had financial aid and was going to work out very well. But I wasn't crazy about UConn and the program there, and I always had loved that experimental child psychology course at Brown. So after a year, I applied to go to Brown for graduate study, and they had a rule that you couldn't get more than 2 degrees from Brown. You couldn't get 3 degrees from Brown. I hadn't had my master's degree yet. And so I applied, and Harold Schlossberg was still the chair, and he called me in and said, why should you do this? And I gave him whatever reasons and rationales I had, and finally he said, well, I guess a year and a half's got the poison out of your system, so we'll let you back in. And so I went, and then I worked with Lou again in his lab with newborns, and that was, again, a wonderful mentoring experience.
And that's where you got your master's degree?
I got master's and doctorate from Brown.
Oh, so you did all 3 of them there?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Rule breaker.
Rule breaker.
Yeah. Fascinating. And what did you get your PhD in?
Experimental child.
Okay.
Which was what Lou's area was. I did my dissertation with neonates, and as I say, Lou was a remarkable guy, and he was the sort of person that if you encountered him, even till today, if I encounter him, you may be feeling good or not good when you meet him. You feel good when you leave him.
Interesting.
It's very much so. He has a focus that makes you feel comfortable.
What was it? So you go on and get a PhD. What was it about your family that parents who were not college educated but must have valued education or opportunity? Did they push you guys to do to go get degrees, or were they? How did support look like, or what did it look like in your family?
Well, my family was very disappointed that I didn't go to Yale. My brother was the older son, and in the traditional Ukrainian family, that firstborn was really the star, and he was an outstanding student. He was valedictorian in the high school, and so he was remarkable academic ability. And so they wanted me to follow in after that, and I certainly was not going to do that. And I think that my mother was okay with it. I think my father was disappointed forever and ever. But no, they certainly did have a strong emphasis on education, and we were made to do our homework and make sure it got done. And honestly, you didn't have to try too hard with either of us because we both enjoyed our academic experiences.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how the son of somebody who's delivering bread goes to get a PhD. And I'm thinking about a lot of my college students who are first generation college students, and what is it that if we can meet them where they're interested or where they're at, can we affect this kind of a change or an inspiration in them?
I said to you a moment ago that some of what happened to me was serendipitous, and as far as the decision to go to graduate school, I didn't know what I was going to do when I was in my, I got into the psych major in my sophomore year, going into junior year. And so I hadn't had a lot of courses in my junior year when you'd be thinking about what you're going to be doing. And I probably shouldn't tell this story, but I was dating a woman who was at Brown also, and she lived in Providence. Her family was in Providence, and I used to go over there at times for meals, and her mother was a very strong, domineering woman who was extremely opinionated, and lovely lady in many ways, but very opinionated and was always right. And one Sunday, I forget if it was my junior or senior year, I went over there for dinner, and she was just going on all cylinders. And I got back home to the dorm, and I thought, I got to get out of town. I'm not going to look for a job in Providence next year. This woman I was dating did end up getting married, and we were planning on getting married. And so I was thinking about staying around, and I thought, I cannot spend another year going to those dinners. And so then I decided I would apply to graduate school, and I'm so glad I did.
And that's why you went to UConn.
And I went to UConn. I had some other options, but that one looked like the best choice at the time.
So where did you get your first teaching job?
Providence College.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a story.
Love to hear it.
Well, Providence did not have a psychology major in 1967 when I was graduating from Brown. And they were looking to start a major. They had hired two guys. One fellow was ABD from Boston College, and the other had a master's degree from I forget where. And they had started offering some courses in psychology. And the year that I was getting out of Brown, they were looking to hire 3 people to start a major. And so among those hired was me, another fellow who was in my class at Brown, and a fellow who was getting a master's degree in counseling from Merrimack or Assumption, I'm not sure which. And so we started a program, and it was, in many ways, it was a remarkable experience. I think we put together an outstanding program. We started with a class of 5 guys. It was a male school at the time. We started with a class of 5 guys. Our early classes were great. We had all kinds of numbers of people who were going to graduate school and were very interested, and I think we did well by them with the program and what we offered them. So that was really quite the experience. And I think we put together a good program, but I also think it was the case that Providence probably should have hired some people who were a little bit further out of graduate school than we were, because I think we made some mistakes that were partly from our naivete.
Any mistakes off the top of your head that you can remember?
Well, for one thing, perhaps because we were young and maybe had a chip on our shoulders to some degree. There were this was a Catholic college, and there were a number of the Dominican priests who seemed not to like the idea of these heathen psychologists coming in, and we weren't necessarily heathens, but that was the impression some people had. And so we got a chip on our shoulders, and that was something that I think affected things for a while. And I think that One thing that occurred to me maybe 20, 30 years after the program started was that we had never had our own mentors as teachers, and we didn't provide it. I think of the people we hired, we couldn't provide it to each other because we had no experience. And then when we did have experience, we didn't have the mindset for providing mentorship on the experience in a college. And it wasn't until after I got involved seriously with STP that it became apparent to me that this was a failing that we had and led to some of the disturbance we had in the department.
How long did you teach before you got involved in STP?
Well, I joined APA, I think, in 67, and I joined Division II in 67. But getting involved wasn't until P3, 1999.
Okay. So how do you think, you're at P3, you're around all these teachers, you're talking, who are deeply invested in teaching and doing it well, and you're probably observing some great teaching or some maybe different kinds of conversations. How do you think back over your 20 years before that teaching, pre-STP, pre-being involved with all those folks? Because I think back on my first years of teaching, and it's a place I don't want to go.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. I think that when I think back now of that time, what is most compelling to me is what came after. What went before, I can remember being in class, and I think to myself, now, how could I ever have done that to these students? How could I ever have thought that standing and talking to them as I did would do anything but put them to sleep? And why,
Yeah. No, it's funny to me because I think maybe we all experience the same thing. Yeah. Unless we're one of those fortunate instructors who did get mentored. Mm-hmm. Then I think there are people like Missy Beers over at Ohio State who we're going to hear from today, who do a really good job of training teachers. And so there are some people who that happens with, but many of us just didn't get that.
Well, there was no such thing. There may have been, the program at UNH may have been started by then, but that would have been probably the only one.
Did you set out to teach, like right from the beginning you wanted to teach?
Yeah.
Okay. So you didn't want to continue to do research? Like,
oh, no. I was interested in doing research.
Oh, you were?
And
but not primarily.
But I wanted an academic position, and I was coming out of an R1 institution. And as it turned out, the resources at Providence were not nearly what they would be at an R1 institution. And so the kinds of things we could do were much more limited. And so I got out of doing neonatal research and did some work on animal behavior and some stuff with older kids. But most of it was ending up going to teaching. But as I said, my thinking about that period is thinking about what happened later, because that experience with P3 and the people whom I met there completely turned my career around. And I would tell Ginny Matthew that all the time, and Jane Hallinan. And Jane was on the assessment committee. And my department at the time was in something of a turmoil. And we were looking for a department review that might help us get through this largely interpersonal turmoil. And so we got in touch with the consultation group with Division II, with STP. And another colleague called about it, and we ended up getting Jane Hallinan as a reviewer. And then I went to P3 the summer before Jane was going to be coming to Providence. And it was an interesting interaction that she and I had, and I think that she would support this, that we didn't want to get too friendly because we knew that she was going to be coming and do the department review. And Jane doesn't pull any punches on anything, and she, was very clear that she was going to do an honest job, and I'm saying to her, "You got to do an honest job. Let's go that way." And so we worked together. We worked very well together. But then she came and did the review. Within moments, I think she discovered that we had this turmoil, and she just folded the whole thing up and said, "Let's talk, guys." And so she did psychotherapy for 2 days, and she left, and the department agreed to work together again.
Wow.
And it made a huge difference there. And my interactions with her, a little while later, I got a call that I want to do the reading, and so ended up doing that. And of course, all the people I met there, just changed life.
Yeah. So you did the reading for how many years?
Oh, I don't know. Well, I did it from around 2002 until I retired.
Okay.
And I retired in 2008. I did it a year or two after that, and then the college board said I wasn't teaching intro psych anymore, so I couldn't do it.
Yeah, yeah. And how many years did you spend at Providence?
41.
41 years. Yeah. Have you ever been back, or do you go back for any reason?
I encounter people. When I retired, I said to you there were a bunch of people who were hired at Providence around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I retired, 3 of us retired at the same time. And I still see one of those fellows with some regularity. I see some people I've interacted with here who are from Rhode Island College, which is up the street from Providence. See some people from there from time to time. I don't go back physically a lot. I communicate with them, but
Yeah. How many majors when you left? How many majors at Providence?
total was probably around 225.
Yeah.
When the 3 of us left, we hired some of the finest new people that you'd ever want to have, and we started a research methods statistics sequence that was intended to integrate research methods and statistics, be a 1-year course with lab that used the lab data from the research methods to do the statistics, and so it was supposed to be very well integrated. And we're going to keep it to 20 people and require that everybody in the department teach it. And maybe we couldn't do that with the current staff, but new hires would be articulated that this is a course you're going to have to go through. And so there wouldn't be any one person who'd have that total responsibility. And that has worked out beautifully for them. They call it the course that killed the department, but they are continuing to do it, and the students really respect it, and it works out very, very well.
Interesting. So 3 of you taught there together for 41 years. Ish.
Yeah, 3 of us did, but one of those who retired at that time was not that one of those.
Okay. But you taught side by side
Yeah.
for decades with these folks.
Yeah.
Wow. When you look back at your time as an instructor, anything that you're particularly proud of when you look back at the psych department or the program? Or
Well, I'm very proud of what we did at the outset. I think that it was a pretty traditional program, but it served people well, and I think our early success with getting students to where they wanted to go seemed to indicate that we were doing pretty well. So I'm pleased with that. I had a lot of things that went well. I think that next I would kind of turn to having, when I was leaving, so much was being done on nationally on issues of assessment, and we really focused on that. And in our final hires and in this attempt to get people involved fully in the required course in the department and focus on assessment for that, I think that was a good contribution that we made at that point.
yeah, so you take those things that you're learning through STP and you kind of infuse them back into your program.
I tried, yeah. I thought that would be important. I could buy it. I drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, well, Good. I'm glad you did. So let's. We just have a few minutes left, but I want to talk about STP for a second because you served there. Actually, maybe you can run me through what are the capacities that you served STP over the years.
Oh, geez, honestly, I don't know. I started to get involved in after P3, which was 1999, and I don't know that I had another formal title. You know, we worked on stuff. We published some things that came out of the assessment group.
Mm-hmm. Task forces, probably.
I may have. Honestly, I don't remember.
That's fine.
What just strikes me is that, when I was retiring, the year I was retiring, I get a call from Maureen McCarthy saying, we got this opening and we need to fill the executive director position. And I laughed and said, "You got to be kidding. No way am I going to do that. I don't think I have the skills, number one. And number two, I'm looking forward to retirement. I'm not looking forward to doing another thing like this." And so we talked for a long, long time on the phone, and she was trying to be very convincing. And so we left it with, I'll think about it. And I ended up calling her back and saying, "Well, I thought about it, and, I hear people saying you shouldn't retire away from anything. You should retire into something, and I'll give it a shot if you guys want me to do it." And I'm so delighted I did.
What's funny is that after you retire, and Eric's going to get a kick out of this, actually, that after you retire and you have, I'm hearing your life story. You've accomplished so much academically, and then you start a program, and then you become president of New England Psych, and then you bring Necktop to a new location. The guy who did all those things can still, when he's asked to be executive director, say, "No way I could pull that off." I think it's just pretty entertaining and how much we do self-doubt and probably do have the skills or have
It
have
was
those
hard.
experiences.
It was hard starting. It was STP was a much bigger operation than the other things that I was involved in, and I was still working. I had 6 months to go
when you
before
took
I
it
retired.
over. Yeah.
So that was a very, very difficult 6 months.
Right. Is there a handoff where somebody kind of mentors you through that?
Well, Tom Pusateri preceded me and has postceded me.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom was outstanding. I went down to Georgia, stayed with him for a weekend, I think, and he and I had regular phone conversations where he really got me through it.
Yeah. How would you describe what is that role of executive director? What are you doing?
It's changed a great deal. When I started, a lot of it was clerical, and you had a lot of time spent entering data, entering membership stuff, sending out packets of material to new members, doing, mailing the new. Much of our expense when I took this job was mailing expense. We had, I often wondered why we were charging students $15 when we had foreign students, and it would cost us more than $15 to send them material in 1 year. But now the focus is much more on, I think, on trying to facilitate the work of the steering committee, the executive committee, being a troubleshooter for members. Things get lost. People have difficulty. You're trying to encourage involvement in the programs that we have. So it's a wholly different. It's a much more professional job now than it was at the very outset that I took over.
Yeah. Well, I've gotten to know you just on the tail end of that work and kind of coming out of that work, and I just know that you are beloved by so many people at STP, and it's clear to me that you did a pretty great job of what you did there. So thanks for your service to STP. I think you've obviously left it back in good hands too with Tom in that position. So.
Well, I protest to some degree because I think that there are probably things that I screwed up that nobody knows about. I really do think that I don't know who the quote is from, but some very large percentage of success is just showing up, and I think that's one thing. When I got places, I showed up for college, but I had to work to do it, but nonetheless, I think that the fact that you're there and you at least give somebody an ear, I think makes a difference.
So are you enjoying retirement over these? I guess it's been a decade since you retired.
I'm happy to be retired. If I think of moving away from the day-to-day work of the academic environment, I'd like to be in there and do what I want to when I want to, but just don't like the idea of having now to show up every day for work.
Right.
And I am delighted that I took the STP position, and that made a big difference in my retirement. It gave me the opportunity for 10 years to continue the interactions with the wonderful group of people whom I encountered in 1999 and afterwards, and that has just been massive. I should say that. I mentioned a number of people, and I can't not mention Ken Keith, who has just been such a tremendous support to me, and a wonderful guy.
Yeah. So retired now from Providence and also retired from STP, but you do show up. I saw you in Phoenix last month. So so you'll continue to show up to things from time to time?
I do. Oh, I will show up at things from time to time. I probably will come up here to New England Psychological for events from time to time.
Well, at least for your talk.
Yeah, if they still have that. I'm so grateful for their having done that. It was just remarkable. But I'm on the board of EPA now.
Okay.
And so that gives me the opportunity once a year to go to that meeting, attend their board meeting, and interact with a goodly number of friends who were there too.
Yeah, I've observed something in folks who have been part of STP for a while and who retire or have contributed to teaching of psych in other ways and then retire. Some keep their foot in a little bit, and then others just kind of cut loose. And I realize that that's just a decision that individuals are going to make. But I really appreciate folks like you because who still show up because I think we need the institutional history. We need the mentorship, and I think it's been a theme that we've been talking about this morning and in the last hour. But it's so important to have you guys around, to have you in the room telling us about how things were and how things have changed and giving us advice for the future. I just anyway, it's always welcome, and we're so fortunate to have you paving the way for what's coming, because really good things are coming for STP, it seems.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah.
But I thank you for those words, and I enjoy the chat.
Well, Ted Bosack has a talk named after him that Barney Bynes is going to give tonight, and we might actually even try to record that talk. I was talking to Barney about it, so we'll see if we can do that. That'd be kind of fun to have that on record.
Would be.
So, Ted, thanks for all your contributions and for sitting down with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.